Hey, what's up? It's Joe. Now I have a question here from April. I put my medium frame honey super on with an excluder 10 plus days ago. 2 deep hive bodies under it are 90% full. Opened this evening to check and honey super is empty. A few bees here and there, but zero progress. Thoughts? So this is a great question. I see it coming up quite a bit. People try and put on additional space and then the bees don't use it. I've had it happen to myself. And sometimes it's a little hard to figure out why they're not using it. Sometimes it could potentially be that maybe the bees swarmed and now the population's lower, so that's something you want to look into. You know, it could be that the hive is queenless for whatever reason. Both of those are something to look into. They're not going to be as common of a situation. It is sometimes a little difficult to get bees to start building wax in a new space if they still have space in their old area. They want to try and maximize that space. And especially if it's foundation, if bees already have drawn comb, it's going to be a lot easier to get them to move into that new drawn comb because they can just start putting honey in there. But bees try and be as efficient as possible because wax building is very resource intensive. They try and be as efficient as possible when it comes to wax building. So rather than building additional wax, they try and maximize all the space that they have already built. And what happens is, a lot of times that starts crowding out the brood nest because they'll put honey in the brood area. And when you're trying to build your colony up and you're trying to get them to build as much wax as possible, especially in the first year when you just have foundation, you want that bee population to be as high as possible. The more worker bees you have, the more bees that can be dedicated to wax building, to honey production, and that kind of thing. Now you do have to be careful at a certain point because it increases the likelihood of swarming with too high of a population, but you don't want them to get honey bound. And if they get honey bound, it can also be a cause of swarming because the queen doesn't have room to lay eggs. So something that I think works really well is a technique called pyramiding. So if you want them to move into a new space that they're not already in, something that works really well to get them in the new space is by moving brood comb up. So if you have a single deep brood chamber and now you're putting on another deep brood chamber, and you want them to move up into that other deep, sometimes it's difficult to get them to do it. But if you take, say, 2 or 3 frames of brood and you move them directly above the frames of brood below, and you then put foundation in those brood slots below, they will move up to keep that brood warm. And I would be careful in colder periods doing that, or if the population is low. You want to make sure you have enough bees to properly cover that brood to keep it warm, because brood has to be at about 93 degrees Fahrenheit, especially the cap brood. It's more critical with the cap brood than with the larva, but it has to be in that range for them to properly develop. That is a good technique. Now, if you have, like in this case, she had 2 brood chambers already, they're filled up, or 2 deep chambers, and she's adding a medium. That makes it more difficult, especially if you don't have any drawn medium frames. There's nothing to move up. So if you just have one hive and all you have is 2 deep supers, and the deep supers are drawn, it's not as easy as just moving a frame up. So what I would try and do is, if you have another hive, just pull a medium from the other hive and stick it up there. But you can try and stick the medium between the 2 deeps Now you can potentially get some brood in there, but it's going to get them to draw it out. And once they start drawing it out, you can move it back up. If you don't want to do that, you can try removing the queen excluder. Sometimes that does act as a barrier. Sometimes bees don't necessarily like going through there. And I have seen people that what they do is they coat the foundation with honey, and that will also work really well. You just have to be careful where you're getting the honey from. You don't want to spread disease by feeding honey. So, if it's something that you pulled from that hive and it's from that hive, you can certainly try that. You can also try coating them with sugar water, just spraying sugar water on the frames. It will get the bees going up there for sure to clean the sugar water. One of the things that is necessary when bees draw out comb is a honey flow. If you have nothing blooming in the area and the bees aren't able to bring in nectar, they're not going to build foundation. And something you can do to encourage that is you can feed them. But you have to be careful feeding them if you're planning on extracting that honey. So those are all things to kind of be aware of. But in this particular person's case, I would probably remove the queen excluder and spray everything with sugar water and get the bees up there. Or probably what I would do is I would just move it down between the two deeps, and that's going to get bees moving between there. You are going to get some brood comb in there. I don't really mind some brood comb being in there. When you extract, just pull the frames that don't have brood. And at a later point, you can stick a queen excluder in there so that the queen doesn't continue to lay in those frames. And then eventually the brood will hatch out. But it's a great way of getting the bees to go into additional space. When there's brood, they will go in there. So those are kind of my thoughts on it. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And I'll probably do a video on this when I'm at the bee yard and show you how it's done. Right now I'm just answering questions in my office. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel if you want to see more of these type of videos. I'm going to do a mix of videos where some of them I'm going to be working at the bee yard, some of them I'm just going to be sitting down going through questions that people are asking and answering the questions. And hopefully you find this helpful. Let me know what you think, and please subscribe to this channel.